very much, Rabbi. Very excited to be here. Congratulations to all the seniors who are graduating. Very, very excited for you guys. Moving on to something very exciting in your lives. I hope you really take the time to enjoy all those friendships that you have and stay in touch with each other. I mean a lot. Definitely trying to stay in touch with each other. And I can tell you that one of the things that touched me the most and was the most tragic thing in my life was when one of my really good friends, who was in my Hebrew high school class, died a year after our graduation while we were both freshmen in college. So take the time to enjoy your friendships and stay in touch with each other. It's so very important. Like the rabbi said, my wife Avery was sitting in one of these seats many years ago. She was bar mitzvahed here with the rabbi who, when we first came back to Groton, everyone kept telling me about how when she was during her bar mitzvah, walked away from the podium, was like the first person ever to do that during her bar mitzvah.
She was an actress. She couldn't be confined to the lecture. She had a mode.
She has not changed. So, like the rabbi said, my father-in-law was in the Navy. My father was an Air Force officer. My grandparents were both in the military during World War II. My dad's dad was an airplane mechanic in the Pacific, and my mother's dad was a dentist in Europe during the war there and helped liberate some of the death camps. And growing up from a very early time, I knew I wanted to serve just as my parents had served, as my dad had served and my grandparents had served. I knew I wanted to serve as well and defend our country because I thought there was something very special, and the freedoms we have here are very special. And so when I was 18 years old, I went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, where I studied, among other things, I studied history, but also ended up studying chemistry, electrical engineering, and a whole bunch of other important stuff there. And I did my thesis when I was there about the Jewish experience at the Naval Academy. It was something the rabbi there asked me to look at, and I ended up having Jewish people from the class of 1921, imagine how old that person was, writing to me and telling me about their experiences being Jewish at the Naval Academy at a time when they weren't even allowed to go to synagogue. It was a very, very, very humbling experience to learn about the challenges that the Jewish people had faced in the military, and also encouraged me in my service. And then after I graduated from the academy, I went to Ohio State University for 2 years where I studied some more history, which did me absolutely no good when I went to study nuclear power a little bit later. But I earned my PhD in history while I was at Ohio State, and while I was there, I studied a little bit of Jewish history, and that also taught me a lot about how important it was that Jewish people take the time to serve in our country's great military. Since then, I've become a nuclear submarine officer. I was initially stationed in Guam, which is an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on the USS Houston. While I was there, I got back together with my wife Avery, who I dated a few years previously. She sworn that she would never date anyone in the Navy, and she would definitely never date a guy who was going to be in a submarine. But, a couple things changed. We got back together while my submarine was doing a shipyard availability in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and she flew all the way out to Guam and joined me, and I'll tell you, any nice Jewish girl who will drop anything and come to Guam to join you is a keeper. So, when you're thinking about criteria for marriage, well, that's a pretty good one right there. And then last year I came back, took Avery back to Groton, which is someplace she'd wanted to go. Got stationed here. I'm now the navigator on the USS New Mexico, which is a submarine that's based out of here. And I also had the privilege of being the navigator on the USS Missouri a few months ago, and they needed a navigator very badly, so they grabbed me on temporary assignment. How many of you have a parent who's in the military? Anyone in this group? All right. Not too many, right? There's actually 3 million Americans in our military. And you think to yourself, well, that's a lot of people, 3 million. But then you think to yourself, there's 310 million people in our country. So less than 1% of our entire country is in the military. And that includes both the active duty and the people in the reserves. And that can go up to age 60. All right? So it's not a very small group of people. They're all volunteers. They serve in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Coast Guard. They're drawn from all races, all religions, and all sorts of backgrounds. When you serve in a military unit, you meet people from all over the country who have done all sorts of different things that you would never expect. Some of the jobs of people in the military are kind of normal jobs, where you work from about 6:30 to about 4:30 at night, work in an office, maybe work in a repair shop. Some people work on ships and planes, some people work on tanks. And sometimes it's not a very normal job. Sometimes you go to really far away places, and sometimes you stay there for 6 to 12 months, maybe even longer. And yeah, the only way you stay in touch with your family is through email, maybe the occasional phone call. And if you're deployed and you're doing a mission that's very important, sometimes you can't even do that. It can go for months at a time. It's not really a normal job. My mother frequently asked why a nice Jewish boy would join the military. I remind her that she married my dad and he was in the Air Force at the time. She then reminds me that at the time he said he was getting out. Tricked her. Despite my mom's good personal experience, it's a really good question. You can't always take Shabbos off. Right? In port, we have a duty rotation, so that everyone stands the same amount of duty on a submarine. You just sometimes have to stand duty. This last Saturday, I was standing duty on the boat myself. Out to sea, every day is a work day. No one can slack off at any time because there's simply too many dangerous things when you're diving hundreds of feet below the water that anyone can just take a break at any time. Every day is a work day. You just can't take the Shabbos off. If you want to keep kosher, it's not easy. On a submarine, we have one galley, maybe 4 or 5 cooks, but only usually one or two of them are cooking at a time. They're cooking for 130 people, and everyone's going to get the same food. Okay, so it's not always easy to keep kosher. There was one time when I was underway on the Houston, we got extended at sea. I thought I'd be able to pull into port. I bought my Passover matzah well ahead of time. I had all sorts of Passover food. I was going to be good to go. I left it behind because we were getting underway in January, and I said, yep, Passover is the start of April. We'll be back way before then. And we got extended. There was stuff going on in the world. They said, you got to stay out of sea. Next thing I knew, I was doing Passover at sea. And had no matzah or any with me, and just having to be very creative trying to avoid eating leavened food. Very, very difficult. I lost a lot of weight that week. You can't always get the holidays. As I said a little earlier, I had the privilege of being the navigator in Missouri a little bit earlier this year. I was given about 2 or 3 days heads up that it was going to happen. All right, I'd gone to services here a few days before for Rosh Hashanah. Things were moving along. My wife and I had made certain plans. Next thing I know, my captain's telling me, hey, Missouri needs you. Going over there to getting underway on Friday. I'm looking at my watch. I'm thinking, Friday. Something important. Oh, Kol Nidre. I'll tell you, for Kol Nidre, while most people were, doing Kol Nidre in synagogue, I was coming down from the bridge and preparing to submerge the ship. All right, so I was doing a little bit of praying, but not the same kind that perhaps is going on in synagogue. So I've been underway twice on Passover. I've been underway twice for Hanukkah. It's not a normal life. It's not an easy life being Jewish. There's very few chaplains in the Navy. When I first joined the Navy, we had 6, and I was very lucky to get to go to the Naval Academy where one of them is permanently stationed. And I've got to meet I think I've met all of them now. It's not too many. That's how few there are. But now I think there's even less. Once again, it's an all-volunteer thing. We can't ask, we can't draft chaplains to join the Navy. So you get who is willing to join up. The Air Force and the Army generally are stuck with Orthodox chaplains because that's usually the only rabbis who want to join. When I was growing up in Texas, I had 4 rabbis in a row who were Orthodox. And I'm not saying anything about the Orthodox, but sometimes it's a little bit different than what the rest of us are used to. You have the boys on one side, the girls on the other. It seems a little odd. The rabbi doesn't show up for half the year because sun's